After years of planning and protest, work on Britain's biggest building project is underway.
This is a big moment because the project is now actually happening.
Those in the way of the high-speed railway have to move.
It's like the King's come round, he slapped a notice on my gate and he said, right, you're out.
I just can't believe that they're allowed to treat people like this.
Because I think they've overspent, and the only way they can get the money back is by robbing the likes of us.
The word is costs are rising.
It is the most expensive railway in the world, ever.
Tonight on Panorama, a whistleblower speaks out.
I was absolutely appalled that numbers could be advanced in such a loose and slapdash fashion.
So, will HS2 stay on track?
I'm not worried about us overspending. I'm confident we've got a budget that we can stand by.
It is a grand vision, a network of super-fast trains that will knit the country closer together, from the great cities of the north to Euston Station here in London.
The High-Speed 2 network will transform rail travel in Great Britain. It's the backbone to a new high-speed Britain, connecting the north and the south. High-Speed 2 will be an engine for growth in the 21st century.
It'll take up to 25,000 workers to build the line, and once it's finished, it's claimed 100,000 new jobs will be created, boosting the UK economy by billions of pounds a year.
But it is expensive, very expensive. The official cost is £56 billion. That is more than £800 for every man, woman and child in Britain. And to build the line, you need the land it runs across, and land does not come cheap.
We own that building, that building, that building, and the building behind you can't see was mine.
And when did you buy all this property?
In 2002, 2003.
Michael Gross had ambitious plans to develop his Euston site as a shopping, residential and business complex well before HS2 came along.
In August last year, they invoked their statutory powers and took possession.
So they compulsorily purchased it?
Yeah.
How big a compulsory purchase is this?
Mine is the biggest.
The biggest compulsory purchase on the line or ever?
Ever.
It's the biggest compulsory purchase?
Unfortunately, ever.
HS2 has so far paid 90% of what it thinks the land is worth.
So how much has HS2 paid you?
They've paid me 90% of their unrealistic valuation.
So you're saying that they've underestimated the value of your property, put simply?
Hugely.
How much more money are you expecting to get from HS2?
Much more than they've paid so far.
They give you an idea of how much more?
It runs into hundreds of millions.
Hundreds of millions of pounds more?
Yeah.
He's already been paid hundreds of millions, but says he's also lost out on the potential to develop the land. HS2 disputes he should be compensated for that. Any money paid comes from the public purse.
But it's the responsibility of HS2 to make sure they get the best possible value for taxpayers' money, isn't it?
The way they get the best possible value is subject to paying fair and reasonable cost. Best possible value doesn't mean getting it on the cheap. That was my life's achievement. That's what I worked hard all my life to be in a position to buy something like this. My position is essentially no different from Mr. Smith and Mrs. Brown, the smallholder, up and down the line. It's just a question of noughts. At the end of the day, I sweated blood for my properties at Euston, and they're taking it away from me as an undervalue. It's legalised theft.
Like any big project, working out what land was needed and how much it would cost was key right from the start. Get the estimate wrong and it could easily go over budget. It was Doug Thornton's job to get the figures right.
I was to be HS2's land and property director. I was to be responsible, my team were to be responsible for acquiring all the land interests that High Speed 2 required to purchase to enable the construction of the railway.
That's a huge job, isn't it?
Yeah, it's an enormous job. You know, I can't think of anything that is bigger here in the UK.
This is the first time Doug Thornton has spoken out publicly since leaving HS2. He has years of experience overseeing multi-million-pound land purchase programmes for some of Britain's biggest companies.
HS2, no thank you. HS2, we don't want you.
By the time he joined HS2, the project was already controversial. Protests were up and running. Doug Thornton was shocked to find HS2's early estimates were still in use.
The estimates had been done, I believe, by taking a desk-based approach to trying to roughly calculate the numbers of properties that HS2 required to purchase between London and Birmingham. What needs to be done?
They tried to work out how much properties were likely to cost. Doug Thornton says it quickly became clear there were some huge underestimates.
What kind of underestimates are we talking about?
Typically, you would see sort of houses, say maybe at 100 or 200,000 pounds of a difference. More complex cases, you were sort of seeing orders of magnitude of several million pounds of difference.
Several million.
Yes, and that really very much concerned me as to the final implication as to where that would take the budget.
And that's not all. Doug Thornton compared that early estimate with HS2's Book of Reference, a more detailed and up-to-date list of the properties it might need to buy. And the two did not match up, not at all.
There was a gap of almost 100% in terms of the numbers, raw numbers of properties that the organisation had not budgeted for.
So you've got two things. You've got 6,000 more properties than in the original estimate, and you're discovering that those properties that the values have been estimated for, are often massive underestimates. I mean, that's a kind of double whammy, isn't it?
It absolutely is indeed. It's a complete and utter nightmare. It really forcibly hit me between the eyes how enormously wrong the figure that was being advanced by High Speed 2 was.
This more detailed work suggested that HS2 could end up spending hundreds of millions of pounds more on property than their early estimate predicted. Mark Thurston is HS2's chief executive.
It's perfectly normal that in a scheme as sort of vast and as complex as HS2, that over time we have a greater understanding of the alignment of the route, how many land parcels and land areas it affects, and what the full extent of that acquisition programs needs to be.
HS2 is now buying the property it needs. But what does that mean for the people and businesses along the route? I'm off to meet some of them in this trusty camper van. Its top speed, a sedate 60 miles an hour. The Sweetland Bakery is in northwest London. It specialises in Middle Eastern pastries.
And this is the baklava
this
production.
This one, the production. I have several baklava. I have sugar-free, I have vegan also as well. We have this one. It's going to be luxury, this one.
This is a luxury product?
Yes.
MICHELINE Haddad's husband started the family business more than 20 years ago. It now bakes 10 million pastries a year.
How many people do you employ in this?
We have 50 to 60 people we have.
Well, so it's not a huge business, but it's a big employer locally.
Yes.
When businesses are compulsorily purchased, they have to fund the move themselves and justify any compensation claim.
The onus was on you to say, listen, this is a thriving business.
Yes, it is. We had to save ourselves.
Is that fair?
No, none of it was fair, but I mean, they had the power, HS2, to do whatever they wanted. I think they had a plan in their minds, which was to go to the big company, some big company, relocate their factory, build a new factory, then sit down with them afterwards and give a bill and go through the process and pay them some millions of pounds. With a small business, it just doesn't work. The small business doesn't have the cash flow to necessarily keep going all the time in its own business, let alone build a new factory.
HS2 says it recognises the process can hit businesses like Sweetland hard. The company has had some compensation, but says it's not enough.
We borrowed money on the trading of the company, and the family put up their houses, their flats, everything they had.
You've kind of invested everything into keeping this business
Once for
going.
all, like we play poker.
You've put everything.
Yes.
You've gambled everything.
Yes.
Everything's on the table.
Yes, yes.
Sweetland has had £2 million to cover its costs. But it says that is half of what it needs. With interest on debts piling up, the family say time is running out.
When is the deadline for this?
End of December, everything is gone. If they didn't give us the money, we lose everything.
We've spoken to people who say they're literally on the verge of bankruptcy because they're waiting for payments from HS2.
Absolutely, not our intent to bankrupt any business. These transactions are very complex. Often there's lots of multiple titles to the land that we have to settle on, and on any individual case, our intent is to pay promptly. We've got to acquire somewhere around 8,000 to 10,000 properties. And one of my responsibilities is ensure that we reconcile the needs to acquire that land and make it value for money. Our job is to find a way of doing that as sensitive as possible, giving people a fair price for their property.
HS2 says it's trying to resolve Sweetland's claim. Doug Thornton says he'd warned HS2 that buying up the land the railway needed would end up costing far more than it had budgeted for.
So you'd identified this really significant underestimate. What did you do within HS2?
We started to talk about it to our finance team. We talked about it to HR. We talked about it to line managers. So it was there. We were calling it out. We had raised it within the organisation to deaf ears. Culturally, I've never seen anything like it. I was absolutely appalled that numbers could be advanced in such a loose and slapdash fashion.
He says he was expected to brief HS2's non-executive board using the lower figure from that early estimate.
I refused to use the figure. I felt if I used the figure, I would be personally misleading the board. I was not prepared to put myself in that situation. I absented myself from HS2. I took legal advice.
You mean you walked out of the building?
I walked out of the building.
You said, I'm not doing that.
I'm not doing that. I want no part of that. I put my coat on one Wednesday evening, walked out the building and breathed a sigh of relief.
He was later dismissed by HS2, which disputes all of his claims.
I found it really the most strange sensation. I've never been in a situation like that in my professional career, and I never wish to be in a situation like that in my professional career again.
He left in 2015. Parliament hadn't yet signed off HS2 and MPs were scrutinising the scheme, including how much might be spent on land and property.
Doug Thornton believed the figure MPs were seeing didn't reflect the true costs. And we've spoken to another former senior HS2 insider who agrees. He says the company had other, more accurate, but significantly higher estimates of how much land and property would cost. What you would expect is that the best estimate of costs at the time would be put to MPs so they could make an objective judgment about the value of your project.
I can't comment at the specific time because I wasn't here, but what I know we've done is we've continued to evolve the estimate from those early days. What I'm absolutely certain of is in subsequent iterations of the estimate for phase one, we have given ministers and MPs full disclosure of all of what the scope of phase and the cost of phase one is.
An investigation by the National Audit Office found HS2's property cost estimates did increase significantly, but said HS2 hadn't been required to provide its updated estimates to Parliament. When MPs voted, they approved the project.
The creation of HS2 will be the biggest infrastructure project in Europe.
Britain's new high-speed railway was full steam ahead.
British Rail is switched on for tomorrow. Switched on for the fastest service in railway history between London, Manchester and Liverpool. They've spent 175 million on this modernisation. This is a ton-up service which averages around 85 and frequently exceeds 100 miles an hour.
HS2 is way more ambitious. Its top speed of 225 miles an hour would make it one of the fastest train services in the world.
The High Speed 2 network, creating tens of thousands of jobs and new opportunities for us all.
The government says that Phase 1, the line between London and Birmingham, will cost around £27 billion. But that figure is in doubt too.
Is predicated.
Michael Byng has designed a system used nationally and internationally to cost rail projects. He now acts for people affected by HS2. He's done his own detailed cost estimates.
So, Michael, how much is the railway to Birmingham going to cost?
£56 billion.
£56 billion. So why on earth are HS2 estimating half of what you think it's going to cost?
I believe that there is no structured estimate for HS2 and never has been. I'm not anti-high-speed rail and I'm not anti-HS2 per se. What I am anti, and I'll make this quite clear, is a poorly conceived, costed and developed project, which is what it appears to be.
We're confident that we've got an estimate that we can deliver the first phase of the railway for.
So you don't agree that his costs are...
No, we don't agree. We don't recognise that work. We've seen the work, we've seen the basis of those estimates. They don't reconcile to our estimates whatsoever. And our work has been developed now over the last 3 and 4 years, and we're confident we've got a good estimate for the first phase.
When HS2 got the go-ahead from Parliament, it got the power to compulsorily purchase the land it needed. Here in Buckinghamshire, a viaduct is planned to carry the track. This house, an Elizabethan manor, lies right in its path.
How did you come to get hold of a property like this?
Well, I've lived in this lane most of my life, and I used to run errands for the farmer that used to live here. And my uncle then became a tenant because he worked for the local borough, and he then had the right to buy.
And what kind of state was it in when you bought it?
It was derelict, more or less derelict. We had to strip the roof completely back. All the ceilings came down because they were rotten. The floorboards were rotten. We took all them out. We've given up, well, more or less 10 years of our life. It just took my life saving. I thought, what more can I do for my grandchildren than give them this? Now we're getting HS2, knocking it down to put a concrete stanchion on it.
So a stanchion, that's one of the legs?
That's one of the legs for the viaduct.
For the viaduct will come in here.
Yeah.
Where does it come? Where's it going to run?
It runs from over the valley there, across this field, and straight through here.
Straight through here with a stanchion here?
Yeah. It's devastating, actually.
Mommy!
This is not a house. This is a home. You sit there, Mum, for a minute.
It means a lot to us. We spent a lot of time, put a lot of effort into it, and now it's just going to be taken away from us.
Hello.
Crystal, Ron's daughter, who has 4 children under 5, including baby twins, co-owns the house with her dad. HS2 has offered compensation, but the family say it's some way off the real value of their home.
You've got an Elizabethan manor house. Is it reasonable to ask like for like? To get a manor house this near London is going to cost millions, isn't it?
Well, that isn't my fault. I'm not the one that wants to move. I'll stay here then. If it's going to cost them millions, that's not my fault. That's their fault. They want to knock the house down. Pay the piper. If I want to buy something that I can't afford, I don't buy it. And I'm not getting like for like. I'm just getting a silly offer that I could buy something, you know, in a street or whatever have you. I chose not to live in a street all my life. I've lived in this rural setting all of my life. I don't want to spend the rest of my life arguing with neighbours.
The kids just don't know anything about it, and that's how I would like to keep it. But at the same time, at one point in their life, soon, it's all going to be changed.
What do you mean?
It's all going to change. For the kids. Oh, and for us, but it's mostly the kids.
You mean you're going to have to move out?
Yeah. And their lives are going to change completely. Hopefully for the better, but we don't know that because we don't know where we're going to go.
But it does mean you won't be with your family anymore.
Curzon Street is to be Birmingham's high-speed station. Construction began a couple of months ago.
HS2 is being built here behind us, as we see. This will benefit the whole of the UK, and actually the West Midlands will probably be the primary beneficiary because we will be right at the centre of this. So it's about jobs, it's about economic regeneration of areas along the line, and brilliant connectivity between 10 of the UK's biggest cities.
Not everyone in Birmingham is so enthusiastic.
Putting people on the streets. They're on the dole tomorrow. HS2 weren't designed to put people on the dole.
They come down to take possession of the property. We've been served notice, the 3 months' notice. We refused to hand the keys over and we padlocked the gates up. We done what we had to do. That's what I feel we done. No more, no less.
Darren Bartlett owned this yard, which was taken by HS2 in July. He thinks the process is unfair.
If you buy a house off somebody, you don't get the keys until you've paid for it. HS2 are taking the keys and then doing the negotiations afterwards. So you've lost the one thing that you've got. You've lost your keys, which is you've lost your land.
HS2 has since made him an offer, but like others we've met, Darren says it doesn't reflect the yard's actual value.
This is the site, yeah, this is the...
There were 2 businesses on the site, which sits on a busy junction. One of his tenants, Adnan Bhatti, ran a garage here.
I used to have tyres in the first unit, and the next door I used to have, like, you know, the ramps to repair the cars and everything.
It must be weird for you coming back and seeing it all kind of with the security guards in there.
It's madness. I've owned it for 31 years, me and my brother. My late father made me buy it when I was 19. There's no words to comprehend it, really. But in 2018, it's almost like we've gone back 200 years. It's like the king's come round, he slapped a notice on my gate, and he said, right, you're out.
Like you're the peasant,
and I'm the peasant.
It's the king's land,
and it's the king's land.
taking it back.
They don't understand working class people. They are not as big as the big companies are. We don't have the savings. We just work and we just pay over, like, you know, the bills. I might have to sell the house because I can't afford, you know, to run the business and can't afford to pay all my debts.
Adnan has received no money at all. HS2 disputes he's entitled to any compensation. And you don't have to go far to find more people whose lives have been disrupted by the new railway. Carly Sitek and her father have a wood recycling business.
Dad started off with 1 truck on his own, collecting good pallets from various businesses, then selling them on. The business has been our lives. Since I've been small, it's always been Dad has worked 7 days a week, Mum's come in and helped as much as she can, as well as take care of me. And as time's gone by, it's grown and grown. Our lives has been wood waste. There's 30 employees. This is a 3-acre site now, which was a bit smaller than where we were originally.
It was in 2016 that the family say they first got wind that HS2 might need their old leasehold site. They say they heard little more until late last year when they were given notice to leave.
3 months' notice they gave us altogether.
3 months' notice?
3 months' notice to move a 3-acre operation. HS2 said all of your moving costs will be paid for, any loss of earnings, any extra labour you've had to take, everything they said we would be paid.
With industrial land in short supply, Carly says she had to pay over the odds for her new site. They moved the business over a single weekend.
All the machinery, we had to hire a low loader to move it all.
And why did you have to do it all in 2 days?
Because we just couldn't afford to shut the operation for any time. We'd lose customers, so we had to keep trading.
And because of the pressure to find a site at such short notice, Carly says, she had to buy a place that wasn't well suited to her business.
This is a temporary structure that we've had to put up just so that we've got the height to load these lorries and to give us extra space, because this building that was already here was not big enough for us to be able to operate.
So basically, this is just like a giant tent?
Yes.
What has HS2 said about providing you with money?
All that they've provided us is with an interim payment. They're saying that this is 90% of what we will be getting, which is 45,000 out of 300,000 that we've spent on the move.
So they're paying you 45
They're
grand?
paying us 45,000.
And you're saying you've spent 300,000?
Yes, and I didn't receive that until August this year, when we'd been in the site nearly 8 months. And I said, if you don't pay me some compensation, I'm not going to be able to pay my VAT bill and the business is going to have to shut.
HS2 says it's still working to see what further compensation might be payable.
Hey, Paul, how are you?
Hiya, nice to meet you.
So how has all this been for you?
It's like highway robbery. You know, they took all our savings we had, all our emergency money. We've got nothing left at all now. I'm a Brummie. I'm proud to be a Brummie, and so it's good for Birmingham. What's good for Birmingham is good for me. But it's the way they've gone about it. You know, if they've gone about it the right way about it, I can't understand what they're doing. You know, it's crucifying us. I think they've overspent, and the only way they can get the money back is by robbing the likes of us.
HS2 denies it is in trouble. But the company acknowledges it is facing challenges to keep costs within budget.
Your contractors are coming back and they're saying, I can't build what you want me to build for the prices that you've suggested. It's going to cost more than that. Now, that sounds to me as if HS2 is over budget.
No, we're not over budget. We have to square off the budget, how long it's going to take to build, and the set of requirements. And those things, by their nature, will continue to evolve over the coming months.
Has HS2 been honest with Parliament and the public about the real costs of this project?
On the evidence I have now, I don't believe it has been totally open and frank with Parliament.
Since the scheme was first put to Parliament, the estimated costs of buying up land and property have gone up and up. As we've heard, there's pressure on construction costs too. And the second phase from Birmingham up to Leeds and Manchester still needs to be approved by MPs.
You must be anxious. If the project doesn't go ahead, you're not going to deliver value for money, are you?
The real prize for the country is to join up Birmingham to Leeds and Manchester. The real economic shift that HS2 delivers to Great Britain is the second phase. It's got a really strong business case, and we're confident we'll get the legislation in the House for the second phase. HS2, and by its nature, is one of those schemes that sort of divides opinion. We're very aware of that. There's a huge groundswell of enthusiasm around the country for HS2. And what's really important is that we make HS2 a success, because we need HS2 as a country.
The question for MPs will be whether those national benefits outweigh the vast costs and the upheaval and disruption that thousands of people along the route are already suffering.
It's awful, because our futures were set. We were on the brink of success, and now we've just gone backwards 30 years.